Okay, we're going to do a video interview of Dan Chase, and here is Dan talking about his life in the military. And basically, one of the first questions is, what is your connection with Anderson Island?
My wife. During I was stationed in Fort Lewis, Washington, and that's another story, but anyhow, I was in military police school, and I graduated, and I said, I don't want to be a military policeman. This is when I came back into service. I said, I prefer not to be a military policeman. They said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, give me my old job back of operating a locomotive on the railroad, and by golly, I'll be darned if they didn't do it. I mean, the military never does what you want, but this time, so within a week, I found myself at Fort Lewis, Washington. I was, when I went to basic training the last time, they made me a cadre. And so I was training trainees. And one of the young men that I was bunking with was from Washington. His name is Larry Kuchar. And now he's a lawyer, and we have dinner with him. But anyhow, Larry had a girlfriend he was engaged to, and he said, my girlfriend wants to know if her girlfriend could ride a GI. And that's how the whole thing started. So we got to riding, and then when I got out of the MP school, I told him, Lord behold, I was sent to Seattle, Washington, to Fort Lewis, and I was sitting out in Fort Lewis. There's a locomotive, by the way, on Fort Lewis that GIs run. They just run it in the post. And I said, I know a girl in Seattle. And so everybody said, why don't you call her up? So I did. And the rest is history. I married the girl, and I promised her a honeymoon in Europe, and we got it, because they sent me from Fort Lewis straight to Germany. And she'd never been out of Seattle till she married me. And so we came back. Well, originally we were going to stay, whichever parent was still alive. And both of them were alive when I got out of the service, but my parents were much older and were in failed health, so we moved to Kansas for a short while. And then my parents passed away. And so then we packed up and came to Seattle, and my wife said, there's this place called Anderson Island, it looks interesting. And we came out here and we met Dick, and we liked Dick, and lo and behold, here we are.
Dick Fromm.
Yeah.
Okay, what prompted you to join the services, and did you have a preference for any particular branch? What got you into the military?
I was drafted. However, I was raised during World War II, and my dad sent me to military school for 1 year, which kind of gave me the edge when I was drafted. I knew, how things operated, and so all during both basic trainings, the second one was useless, but the first basic training and the second basic training, I was more of a cadre than I was a trainee, because they were short of trainees. And of course, when I first came in, they were teaching you how to march and do your flank, left flank, right flank, and about face and all this stuff. And I could do that very easily. And we went to the field for our military training. However, I'd already had training in 50 caliber and below weapons at military school. And so then that was when I was with this I think it was called the 5.5 Deuce Carrier Company, which they designed to train all these young men together and give them what they did. They made us acting jacks, and we were all supposed to go overseas together, which we did. We all went on one ship, but as soon as we got to Korea, they said, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And they said, you'll go here, and you'll go there, and we'll go here. And I only saw one of those guys in basic training the rest of the year I was in Korea. And then coming back from Korea, something happened. I can't remember what it was. The ship quit, the Marine Phoenix. I think everybody rode the Marine Phoenix to Korea, and so then we had to be towed partially way in. I got here at Fort Lewis, and I didn't even come to Fort Lewis. I was Fort Lawton in Seattle, and I was in there. I was already past my 2 years in the Army by the time I got there, and they put us on a train and sent us to Colorado Springs, Colorado, and as soon as I hit the States, I was out of the Army in about 36 hours. And then I stayed out for about, I'm having trouble. I think I came back in 53. I need to come a year or two earlier, my memory would have been better. But anyhow, I couldn't find a job, and I was restless because I enjoyed part of the Army. I enjoyed being in foreign countries. I didn't enjoy the work. But anyhow, so I just joined the Army again, and then, like I said, they sent me to Fort Gordon to military police school, and I graduated from there, and they asked me that again. I'll repeat, if I wanted to be a military policeman. I said no. I said I'd rather have the old job I had, and they, for some reason, gave it to me. And from that time on, when there was a railroad, that's what I did. When there wasn't, I was in maintenance, heavy equipment maintenance, and from Korea is the last time I was actually on the line. I was in the Chorwon Valley where Dick was, but he was there ahead of me. And by the time I got there, we were just like they are now, bunch on one side and a bunch on the other. We would do patrols out into the no man's land, and that's the extent of my actual fighting in the military I did. But I won't say I had a great time, but I had an interesting career, because all the time we were in Europe, and I was lucky enough to take my wife, be able to take my family with me. And the only time I wasn't was when I was in Vietnam, and when I was in Vietnam and Thailand, and when I was in Korea. And I was in Korea about a little over a year or two, thanks to the ship failing. But so I was actually only separated about 2 years from. I wasn't married when I was first in Korea, so it didn't make any difference. But in the little over 20 years, it was 21 years. We were only separated a short period of time until I could get housing or get a place to live in Europe. And that's my story.
And basically in Korea, you did mostly train?
I did, yeah, all except for the first month. And at that time, when I was with the Puerto Rican, there were Greeks on one side of us, and Puerto Ricans, and I was in a Puerto Rican outfit, and on the other side there were, now see, I forgot that, did I write that down? No. Anyhow, the outfit in Korea was 712th Railroad Battalion. It's what they pulled me out and put me in Korea. In Europe, when I was operating, I was operating under USAROR, and didn't belong to a battalion as such. That was classified as the operational part of the Army in Europe. USAROR was, and I'm kind of nervous here. What was I looking up?
Basically, what you were doing in Korea, to expand on that a little bit.
After then I operated bought trains up, full trains, from to from Yeongnam-po as far north as we could go, and then and I switched trains out and brought them to Seoul from Incheon. and that actually unloaded them off of the ships. They loaded them in the rail. I switched the rail there, and then I brought the trains made up to Yeongdeung Po, or actually Seoul, and then they were sent farther on up north. They were all supply trains. I didn't carry any troops. There was so much difference in the lines they used when I was there. Korea, they were trucking the new troops instead of taking them on train, because they were sending them everywhere. They didn't have a train load to go to the same place. So that's about all I can say.
You didn't see any action at all there?
No. Closest I ever got was on patrols in Korea.
Mm.
And
was the war still going on at that time?
no, that was one of those peace. In the latter part of the 50s, we kept having those little peace things last 2 or 3 weeks, and then it'd be off, and then another would be a month or two. Actually, I think they called them ceasefire. So I never shot a person, and I've been shot, but not by the Army. I got shot in both legs, not by the Army. So I actually never fired a weapon at an enemy.
And so after Korea, you did mostly train operating, right?
Yeah.
And then you went
and
to
in the last few years, the last trip to Europe, the last trip to Europe I retired. But when I went to Europe the second time, I was in a maintenance battalion, and they decided that I should be a career counselor. And so I filled that office. And then when they sent me back to school, and so the last few years in the Army, I'm going to say 3 or 4, I was recruiter / career counselor for the Army, in which I counseled all the enlisted men and to see if they wanted to re-enlist or if they wanted to get out. And I toured most of Europe, because I'd go to the units, the different units. I'd drive in my car. The Army paid me gas mileage, and but I had to use my own car because we didn't have enough sedans. So I drove all over the wherever there was a location of troops. I'd visit them about once a month, and I don't know how many thousands of miles I drove in Europe, but I was on the road all the time. Lots of time I didn't even go to the office. I just leave from the house early in the morning, by going to Kaiserslautern or wherever there were troops. That each individual unit in the Army battalion has their own career counselor, but they're not a real one. They're a person that's supposed to get a hold of me. That was my full-time job, was enlisting and re-enlisting men in the Army. In Germany, I did some enlisting of civilians who were Army civilians that came of age, and if they wanted to join the Army.
Dependents?
Yeah, dependents.
And then you switched from train operator to while you were in Kaiserslautern, or?
Yeah. Let me see if I got it. Are you recording that?
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is going to sound kind of stupid because
That's fine.
I had it written down here. I've been out of the Army longer than I was in. Let's see, Fort Riley. Well, I went to Germany the first time, and that's where I got in the recruiting business, because the colonel in charge of the battalion didn't have career counselor, and every battalion is supposed to have one. So he gave me the job, or told me that was. I knew nothing about it, absolutely nothing. And so the First Brigade career counselor kind of helped me, and I read books and saw some movies, and so I held the job. So I was pretty good at it, and so during that period of time, I changed my MOS to career counselor OOE40. Also, career counselor get an extra $125 a month pay, which didn't hurt. And so from that period on, which I'm going to say, it's a little bit behind time here on some of this stuff. Like I said, I got out of the Army in 1980, and I reached the rank of Master Sergeant, and everybody would probably say I had a pretty cool job, which I thought I did too. But normally I went where I was sent and kind of did what I kind of learned that in military school. Doesn't work to buck the system.
So prior to the career counseling, you were a train operator in Korea and in Germany.
Yes.
So,
yes. And
which was more fun, the career?
Well, the better job was a career counselor, but more fun was the train.
Okay.
And because there are very few train operators. I don't know. Most people say in the Army you were a locomotive operator. Yeah. The post for that is Fort Eustis, Virginia, and that's where the Army trains railroad. They train crews there, but they very seldom use them. I don't know if there's any railroad, military railroad overseas now or not. Like I said, I left in 1980, and I actually left the railroad part of the thing in I can't remember that year.
That's okay.
Well, the time I got to the maintenance battalion in Germany, and he put me in this career counselor's office. From that point on, I was career counselor, and then about 2 years later, I changed my MOS, and that's when they sent me to career counseling school. Mm-hmm. And so actually, I have 4 MOSs. I was an infantryman, heavy 4-point deuce mortar man. Then I was a locomotive operator, and then I was a maintenance man, heavy equipment, quartermaster maintenance, and then career counselor. And all of them were pretty good jobs, but I just the right place at the right time.
Anything memorable happened? One big event that you can think of that you say, "Holy cow!" or
Well, no.
No.
There was a couple of times we had hot boxes when I was pulling trains, and a hot box is when on the journal. There's a journal box at the end of each set of wheels. This journal box has oil and oily rags in it, and it oils the wheels. Mm. The Koreans like to steal those oily rags because they burn them. Mm. And so if you don't have those oily rags in there, you get what's called a hot box. The axle gets so hot that it'll actually break off, and one of the wheels on the train will either fall off or get caught on the railroad and the track. Oh. I had a couple of hot boxes, but that's why when you're on a train, when you're on a curve, and there has to be curves or you're in big trouble, you always look to the rear of the train and the conductor on the rear is always looking forward, and he's looking to see if he can see any smoke coming out of any of those journal boxes. And that's why in Kansas and Wyoming, where there's very few curves, they have more hot boxes than in other locations, because you just don't have that many. You have maybe 100 miles of almost straight rail, and you can lean out, but you really can't see the whole train as well as you can on the curve. And so that's one of your big jobs on the curve. My interesting things in Korea operating was there are so many tunnels, and Korea is just full of tunnels. And the Koreans were running on the same railroad, and we had no idea where they were. I mean, you're just going down the railroad. There could be one coming your direction and one in front of you. You don't know. I guess that's thrilling. It's very worrisome. And particularly when you go into tunnels, because the smoke's hanging in there from the Korean engine, and you don't know whether he's still in there or whether he's not. And we had what's called a hoop. And we're supposed to, every time we go by a certain location, the guy would be standing out there with a hoop, and you're supposed to catch it when you go by. Well, you didn't always catch it. And the hoop had a little round thing on it, and it would tell you whether there was a train in your block. Now, the railroad's set in blocks, and not blocks like, a block is, there's no set, I'd say no less than 3 miles.
Oh.
Maybe 4. And over there, they're not even very exact. One can be 4 miles and one could be 6. So, and over there we were running a double line, which means we had 2 tracks. But the Americans were running on their railroad without much consulting with the Koreans. So every trip was exciting, to put it mildly. I never hit anybody, but several guys hit. There are big bridges on the rail. They're a mile or 2 long, and it was not uncommon to have a guy come in with a body on the front of his train that he'd hit on that bridge, because you either jump or you get hit. There are some little standoff noise, but the Koreans like that bridge because you'd cut off maybe 5 miles by going across that rail bridge rather than go down and walk around and through. And that was probably the most tragic thing, is that there were, I personally never hit one, but I have seen what's left of one when it comes in on the front of a diesel engine. All those engines, by the way, didn't belong to the Army. They were leased from the civilian railroads in the States. And I'm telling you, they were so wore out by the time we got done with them. We had no maintenance. They were in terrible shape. I doubt if they operated them in the States at all. We just ran the wheels off from them. They were all switch engines, but we were using them to pull trains with, which you could pull short trains with them. That's about all I got to say.
And then the other part is your wife supported you. You know, a lot of people don't realize there's a serviceman, but he gets a lot of support from a family member.
Yes.
And
Our first daughter was born in Landstuhl, Germany. In fact, she's a German citizen. She's bi citizen. My wife was with me, except for the Korean trip and the Vietnam trip. She was with me on all of the other. We spent very little time in the States. Like I said, I was in Georgia, and that was before I was married. But after we were married, naturally we were always. I was in Dugway Proving Ground. That's another interesting place. And again, I'm not sure why they sent me there. But Dugway is, you probably heard about. You never heard of Dugway?
No.
It's where all the atomic bombs were set off, where all of the odd things happen. Dugway Proving Ground is an army post in the middle of the desert in Utah. And they do all of their experimenting in atomic energy and atomic bombs and stuff like that on Dugway Proving Ground. And Again, I'm not sure exactly why I was sent there as a locomotive operator, because there was a rail that ran in, but it was brought in by civilians, and there was no real rail on the post itself. And I was there a year, not almost a year, and a lot of interesting things, a lot of scary things. Like I said, it was they were exploding small, working with small atomic equipment, bombs and bullets and stuff like that. And we had one accident, really bad accident, which shook Utah up, but it was pretty well contained. And you had to have a top secret clearance to get there. That's about all I can tell you about Dugway. I probably maybe told you too much, but it's still operating, and it's still operating as far as I know as an experimental place. But the closest town is, you had to have a 3-day pass to go to town, because the closest town was Salt Lake City, and it was 110 miles away. So that's about all my Army life I can think of.
Okay.
It's been, like I said, I've been out longer than I was in.
Well, we thank you for. I really want to thank you for your service to the country. And so, you know, so many people on this island have been in the past served our country. And so.
Yeah, and there's a lot more combat veterans than and I'm not a combat veteran. That's not because I wasn't in a combat zone. I just, for some, and I didn't try to get out of it. I just seem to always. They seem to pick me for something special. I don't know why. Except that first trip in Korea, I was nothing but an ammo bearer for a 4-point deuce mortar, and we did fire them. And we fired them at when it wasn't one of those treaties going. We fired them towards the enemy, but I saw it captured, but I never shot a person. Or never shot at a person.
But see, each individual in the service has a particular task to do, and Bruce Buchanan put it correctly. He said it takes an army to run an army.
It takes between 5 and 7 people behind the line.
Yeah.
To keep one man on the line.
Yeah, it takes an army to run an army.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you. I'll take a few pictures now.